We'd like to open with public audience. If anybody would like to say something, now is your opportunity. We ask that you state your name, your address, and you have 3 minutes. Does anybody wish to speak?
Mm-hmm.
If it's green light is, if the light's green, it's on.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Peterson, 32 Boston Road. I just want to take the opportunity to thank the administration at Simsbury High School and the assistant superintendents and superintendent, Sue and Matt, for responding or acknowledging my request for information about disciplinary actions with students at the high school. I don't know, just give a little bit of background. My son was a witness to a violent attack at the high school before break, and the video is out there. If members of the Board of Education haven't seen it, I strongly encourage you to see it. It's difficult to see, but I think you should see it. And so I contacted one of the assistant principals about my son being a witness, and I had to leave a message. And I got a call back from the assistant asking me, I said, I wanted to talk to the assistant principal about the attack. It still kind of shakes me up. The assistants came back to me and said, which attack last week? I said there was more than one attack at the high school last week. And so that led me to saying, can we get some information, some statistics about what's happening at the high school? Because this is a violent attack. And so there was another attack. I can't speak to it, and I'm not going to draw any conclusions. But I think based on a lot of what I know from being vice president of SPTC, having a child at the high school, that there are some disciplinary actions issues at the high school. Some victims are being, I think, overlooked. So I'm going to kind of leave it here and just acknowledge my appreciation for all the administration wanting to help me figure out this information so we can get the information out to the community. Because I think we want to know about test scores and who's going to college. But I think we need to know about what's happening with violence at the schools. And I just want to give a little background where this is coming from, because I know there's a federal law that requires colleges and universities to have this information available. So that's why I'm looking to get it at the public school level here in Simsbury so that the community can know about it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to committee.
What about recognition?
No, it's postponed. That's been postponed. So we're going to move on to committee reports and communications. Welcome to the table house.
Hello.
Nice to have you.
All right, so at the high school, the first semester is ending this Friday and midterms will begin beginning Tuesday next week. The winter musical Pippin opens on the 28th of this month, and all winter sports are proceeding as normally as possible with COVID restrictions at the moment. Henry James has also started rehearsals for its musical Frozen Jr. with 60 cast members and 40 in stage crew. And also the high school has started a Girls in Engineering program for 8th grade girls to participate in, so enrollment has started for that. At Tooten Hills, we're celebrating 2 outstanding 6th grade students, Eliana Kim and Juliana Araz, who will be recognized by the Connecticut Association of Schools and the Arts Committee for their citizenship and accomplishments in the visual arts. No major developments at Terrafil, just that clubs such as Design Team, Invention Convention, and Special Chorus are proceeding normally. And nothing new for Central and Latimer, but kids are well rested and ready to get back to school after the break.
That's good to hear. Thank you. Sharon.
Nothing really to report other than Happy New Year to everyone and to our families.
And to you.
Nothing to report on my side.
I do have one thing to report. I am on the MLK in Simsbury Day Committee, and we every year plan a wonderful event at the First Church of Christ. And this year we've decided to postpone it until March due to the COVID situation we're in at the moment. And part of the event that is so beautiful is the students that sing, and it's a small space, and we just didn't know how we'd be able to get gospel choir in there and have it be as meaningful. So we're hoping to I will come back to you shortly with a plan for a March date where we will do it then. And again, we still have the Martin Luther King Memorial downtown that's welcome and open to everyone who wants to walk through and take a look at it. And the website mlkinct.org has other information if anyone wanted to follow that. But I thought I'd share that with you, and I'm sorry we're not going to have the event. It's very sad, but we are trying to at least get it in this year at some point.
Thank you.
Good. Happy New Year to everyone. And so it's this time of year where I will be heading out to DC next week for the week-long equity symposium at this institute. This year it's been scaled back a bit due to the virus in DC, but we'll probably have half of the attendees will also be virtual. So the equity symposium will be going on, and it'll be a long day, an exciting day. The two speakers will be Anthony Robles, who is an NCAA wrestling champion, and Joanna Lohman, who is the athlete, activist, and teacher. And several sessions will be taking place this year throughout the entire day. They will also be having some virtual options for those that can't make it from the West Coast or what have you. We also will be having the Advocacy Institute. That's 2 days of a grueling day on the Hill, and also we will be having education and policy and legislation seminars going on. We will be having congressional luncheon. We're not quite sure who will be coming into DC to come speak to us. We will not be on the day on the Hill this year because the Capitol is closed, but we will also be having a visit with the Department of Education, which is the first time that we're going to be able to do that. So that will be exciting. We'll meet with Dr. Codona and also with the FCC Commissioner, and also meeting with many of the other policymakers in regards to ESSER, IDEA, and tech education. So this is the first time that we'll be in person. We've not met since January 2020, so this will be the first time that we'll all be there together. But we are looking forward to it, and we will be obviously, taking safety precautions and what have you with other attendees that are attending around the country. So that is it. And unfortunately, we will not be having student panels or student groups. They will not be able to attend this year due to COVID and due to restrictions in DC schools. But other than that, it will be a very jam-packed long week. But hopefully, some good news to report when I come back to let you know. With that, CREC will be beginning next week. We will have our first meeting of the year, and we are going to be gearing up for the legislative session that will take place on February 9th here in Connecticut. So it's going to be a short session. They convene, General Assembly convenes February 9th and has to conclude by May 3rd. So it will be a very condensed session this year. We do not expect too many bills to be proposed this year. It'll just sort of be a catch-all from last year. Again, we will not be able to meet in person because the Capitol's here in Hartford is also closed. So there's going to be a lot of virtual testimonies. And the Day in the Hill this year will also be virtual due to unable to attending the Capitol. So that is what's going on this front nationally.
And will they do legislative breakfast virtually as well?
The legislative breakfast will all be virtual this year. Yeah, again, we will not be able to be in person unless something changes by the end of February.
But they're still going to have it.
We will still have all the
Okay.
breakfasts. So
Okay.
Hartford will host its own here for our area. Craig will be the host of this one. And if you can't make this one, the others around the state will also be virtual. So I will give you the dates and the details on that coming forward. So
Thank you, appreciate it. Good luck, stay healthy.
yeah.
Sue.
I just wanted to remind the board and our families that this Friday will be an early release day for the purposes of professional development. Some really exciting things happening and plans in place. So our teachers and staff at the middle school and high school will be meeting by department, and they will be continuing their goal work by department, so some very specific things based upon content. And through K through 6, our staff is going to be participating in professional development relative to social and emotional learning. So we brought the topic before to the board. You'll hear a little bit more about social and emotional learning tonight when Katie Krasula presents from Special Services. But this PD is going to provide classroom teachers the opportunity to hear from their peers how they address social emotional learning concerns in their class, how they teach into different skills, and it'll also provide time for teachers to collaborate and do some very specific lesson planning for the needs that they're seeing in their classrooms. So we thank you for that time, but as a reminder to families, an early release.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan.
So I wanted to take a few minutes just to speak to the board and the community about pretty significant changes to our responses to COVID since we were last together in December, driven by the Department of Public Health, the State Department of Education, and endorsed by our own Farmington Valley Health District. So obviously you have probably heard that most significantly the strategy, given the level of community spread that has been experienced with Omicron, is that to go away from the contact tracing that we had been doing in the schools. And that seems counterintuitive to some folks, but I wanted to kind of give a little bit of the background about the idea that that the data that we had collected in schools had proven that schools were one place because of the use of masking, where the number of students who were being quarantined, when you compare that to the number of students who had contracted COVID before this last break, school was not the place where this was spreading. And the amount of effort that was going into contact tracing over what ended up being kind of a low yield strategy at the end of the day caused the Department of Public Health to say, this is not how we want our healthcare folks in the schools using their time. So this pretty significant shift in strategy to say what we want to do is be identifying symptomatic people, doing that through some of these self-test kits, and really changing strategy. So and that also involved the CDC recommended shorter isolation periods and quarantines. We know that the Omicron variant is much more contagious in the sort of initial days through day 5. That's what that is based on. Low transmissibility after day 6 to 10, and that's kind of what the science that is based on, and people have not heard that. And obviously that is so far working for us in the schools. There's been a lot in the news about the governor's response with getting all of our personnel the resources they need in terms of self-test kits and higher grade masks, and then a lot of emphasis in the news that maybe schools hadn't delivered on that. I want to prove for everybody in Simsbury, we have self-test kits, we have higher grade masks, they are at all of our schools. We keep a small supply here at central office, and that has been, we're following that key part of the kind of new strategy. The other part that I want to talk about is attendance, where we are. We're tracking it very closely in the 6 days that school has been in session since we came back. Our staff attendance, absenteeism, has ranged between 9 and 13%. That's a little higher than would be typical for this time of year. And we are certainly seeing cases, and it's a challenge. We are fortunate at this time of year with substitutes that we actually get a pretty good brief time frame, but with college students back, they actually help a lot with, we have people who come back into town and want to help, and that is a key part of certainly the next few weeks. We think we're going to be okay. We are able to, and there's a priority order. I mean, obviously it's classroom teachers first. It has become more challenging to fill things like para roles, and that is more challenging, but like the standard classroom teacher, right now, we have been able to deliver substitutes. We're doing okay with, Mr. Salter continues to do okay with the buses, and we have not had any interruptions of service there. So the way Cindy Freelinger and I are looking at this, like if it stays about where it is now, we're gonna be able to weather it, and we're gonna be able to staff things. All of our calls with the Farmington Valley Health District and the Department of Public Health confirm what you've probably heard in the news, that the belief is there's probably a few more weeks before this surge relents. At least that's the belief, and we think we're able to do that. Okay. We actually, Farmington Valley shared the data. Caseloads are high in Simsbury, as you would expect. They're high all in through, but they were higher the week of vacation week, the week ending January 1st, than they were the week we came back to school, the week ending January 8th. So it's, our hope being that we're at the peak and hopefully going on the downside soon. So that's a little bit of what I wanted to be able to share. Pretty significant change since December, so I thought it deserved a few minutes. And if I did that much on that, you got to give me one non-COVID topic.
Sure.
We all need non-COVID topics.
Yeah. So I spoke about them last month, but it happened last night that our partners, when Jeff Wyszynski was here last week from Tecton, we had the Latimer Lane PTO meeting last night to be able to share the initial design plans. We did switch it to virtual, so the parents who were from Latimer did join it virtually, and it was fabulous to be able to have a very good crowd virtually out there to be able to see that and start to build some real excitement around that project happening. So it was a good night virtually last night for the Latimer Lane community, and obviously that planning continues. So
Terrific.
I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Neil, I have a question, Susan, for Neil. Neil, you mentioned the staffing was 9 to 13, but what about the students?
Students have run, let me look at the 6 days of data, right around 15% absenteeism, which is higher than we would typically see at this time of year. But so everything from a 13 to a 17% that we've seen.
Thank you.
Glad to hear it's coming down, and maybe the routine of school is eliminating some of the gatherings that are making it spread as wildly. So hopefully that's a sign of good things. Amy.
And the snow day Friday helped, I will say that.
There you go. Snow days are always good.
Thanks.
Okay. I would just like to say thank you to Terriffill School for these lovely cards that they made us. And it is always a treat to come back and see what these kids do, and we very much appreciate being thought of. So I would like to say that. I would also like to thank the administration townwide for all their work through this incredible peak that we're having with COVID. I know that there has been work done on weekends and late nights, and I thank you all for making sure that our staff is feeling protected and safe, and that our kids are feeling protected and safe from COVID. And I really hope that there's someday we have a meeting, we don't talk about this again. But for now, I thank you all for all your hard work. All right, now we're on to recommended actions. Approval of the minutes from the December 14th, 2021 meeting. Can I get a motion on that, please? And a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. All right.
One
motion
abstention.
carried. And Sharon's abstaining, okay. Personnel, Mr. Sullivan.
Yeah, 2 resignations that require board action tonight. Both newer educators to Simsbury. Nicole Decker is a speech and language pathologist at Squadron Line, had shifted into the preschool population this year. This is a resignation that is really, it's a sad one. It's been a very stressful time for teachers during COVID, and this is somebody who has decided with an ability to step back from it right now. She's going to step back from it right now, and so this is a resignation after 2.5 years of service for Nicole Decker. And then you will also see Liz Wojawoda, who's a special ed teacher at Central School, has been with us for 1.5 years. She had the birth of her first child recently. She has been out on maternity leave, and got about halfway through her maternity leave and decided, I'm gonna keep doing this right now. So she has resigned her position as a special ed teacher at Central School to focus on her growing family. So you can see the motion down below if somebody could make that.
Cindy, you want to make that motion, please?
Move that the Board of Education accept the resignations of Nicole Becker effective January 14, 2022, and Elizabeth
Mojawoda.
Mojawoda, effective January 28, 2022.
Can you give a second, please?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you both for their service. Approval of the Karen Mccoos Memorial Scholarship.
That's coming to me. So as you know, the board approves any new scholarships. And we do have a new scholarship that is being presented by classmates of Miss Karen Mccoos. Karen was a graduate of Simsbury High School, class of 1990. She was a nurse who recently passed away. So her classmates felt that this would be a great way in which to honor her. So they are proposing a scholarship, one scholarship in the amount of $350. It will be presented to a graduating senior of the class of 2022 who is pursuing a career in the health sciences field of which Ms. Mccoos was a member. So there is a proposal for your consideration this evening.
Can I get a motion, please?
So I move that the Board of Education approve the Karen Mccoos Memorial Scholarship to be dispersed in 2022.
And a second, please?
Second.
Any discussion?
So I just have one question. I heard you say one, and does it matter what branch of health? Is it nursing, medical?
Nope, they did not specify, just a student who's pursuing health sciences. And what happens is that students who meet that criteria, a selection will be made in conjunction with our school counseling department.
I just think it's a wonderful way to remember her. I think it's really wonderful to have these kind of scholarships.
Yeah, beautiful.
Very
Agreed.
touching.
I'm very sorry for all of her friends and her family, but appreciate that they chose to honor one of our kids this way.
Yeah.
Any, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you very much. And now we're on to information and reports.
Great, so I'm gonna kick this one off this evening and ask the Director of People Services, Mrs. Katie Kusula, to come up to the table. You know that annually a presentation to the board occurs. There are some legislative requirements that special services needs to update the board on, most specifically how we performed with the state annual performance plan. So Mrs. Kusula is going to touch upon that, as well as some of the department highlights and goal areas. She's then going to move into a second part around mental health and the pandemic's impact on mental health and how we're addressing that with our staff and students. She will be highlighting a specific program that we are very proud of in the Simsbury Public Schools, the Pathways program, and has invited some very esteemed guests to present about all of the great ways that students are supported through that venue. And then finally, Katie will talk a little bit about budget and some of the things she's being very cognizant of, share with you some of the funding sources for special education, and ask any questions that you might have throughout the presentation this evening. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Katie.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited to share, as Sue said, some updates around our program, as well as a highlight around youth mental health, and also the update around our budget and proposed budget for 22-23. So as Sue mentioned, this is our full department. This is our special ed department, and I have to say, you know, we always kick off with our mission, and our mission and our vision for our students within this Department of People Services is work that's done by each of our staff, each of our teachers, and each of our families every day.
And I come back to, it's not just me leading this, it's also, there's a team of supervisors in our district that do this work that would have loved to be here tonight, but due to COVID, we asked that they participate by virtual. And so Nancy Forsberg is the supervisor of special education at the elementary level. There's a department supervisor at Henry James, Katie Wallace, and a department supervisor at the high school, Leisha Cryer. We have a supervisor at Farmington Valley Transition Academy, which services our 18 to 22 students. And finally, we have a supervisor at our preschool level, Leah Coe. And that team really leads this mission, supports our teachers, our teams, and our students in this work every day around the passion and support to help every student learn. So with that, as Sue mentioned, this is the check the box. We are required every year to report out to the board how Simsbury is doing on that state systemic improvement plan. And at this time, Simsbury is meeting those requirements around all 16 indicators. And this just really evaluates our effort to implement the IDEA and those efforts around special education.
The IDEA.
Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So it's sorry, thank you.
That's okay. A lot of acronyms.
It's one of those that is so commonly used and referred to that I forget. So thank you for stopping and asking that. Okay. But like I said, we're fortunate enough this year as we explain our mission and really get fired up and energetic and passionate around that. We try to pick a mantra or a theme every year within our department. It's a large department of educators that span preschool age all the way to 22. So how do we come together and make sure that we bring that alive? And so as a department, we chose the theme of Row the Boat. It's a mantra by a college football coach, PJ Fleck, and really it's based on some core values and systems, and that is around the OR. The OR is the energy we bring to our students. The boat is the service that we provide to support our students. The compass is that direction that we provide our teams. And in all true fashion of special education, we created our own to add to this, and that is the life jacket. Because at the end of the day, we all know we need our teams. We need those around us to provide that support and to lean on each other to support our students. And so we in special ed this year are rowing that boat through successful waters. And that leads me to each part of this evening's presentation. As Sue laid out, we'd like to give you a brief update on the program updates, how we are doing the work this year, what that looks like. We'd also like to take that time to update you on those mental health focus and youth mental health, and lastly, the budget. So as I get to the department updates, it's a little bit briefer than normal, just because we do want to take the time to really highlight mental health supports and services, but want to come back to these areas of focus. Our achievement gap and service delivery. What does our instruction look like this year? So we were fortunate enough this year to get back to those assessment data points provided by the state through our ESPA and our PSAT and SAT. So we did get those results, and I can tell that our achievement gap is predominantly continued to be defined as a special education gap, and that our gap is larger in the area of math than it is in English language arts. So that's data I know that you guys have reviewed in previous meetings, and it's holding consistent from previous years of data. We also, again, as we look at that gap and how we're going to close that through our service delivery and instruction, we are ensuring that teachers continue to look at our standards of instruction and those high leverage standards and embedding those into our individual education plans, our IEP, goals and objectives. So that's the instructional component that our special education teachers and general education teachers are highlighting. What standards are we seeing in those assessments that we really need to highlight for our students in order to close that gap? Okay. The other thing is we focused some professional development around identifying those standards. And again, in each component of math, reading, and writing, how are teachers, giving teachers time to make sure that they are embedding those skills and teaching to those skills in those plans that they design for students every day. The second area of focus that we've spoken about is reading, and with a primary focus on dyslexia. The teaching and learning team, myself, Betsy Gonzalez, and Maggie Seidel have been working collaboratively this year to really ensure that we work with the dyslexia committee to continue to develop strategies and structures that allow us to ensure that there are strategies and structures around dyslexia, markers, evaluations, instructional tools, technologies available, and that these are widely understood across the entire district. So that's one of our big focuses, is taking all of the research and information we have and getting them to our teams so that we are using consistency and confidence when we work with students with that label of dyslexia. Okay. And then lastly, as Sue mentioned, our social emotional learning has been a pillar of our reopening, and it's been a pillar of the work here at Pupil Services as we make sure that we are supporting students in that high leverage need of social emotional skills. So again, collaboration within the teaching and learning team, with general education, with our equity partners, we are looking at ensuring that we continue this learning. So there is scheduled time still in the schedules at the elementary level. Our secondary students are participating in social emotional learning lessons through their Connect courses. And also our teachers are giving time, as Sue explained, to work on the application of that scope and sequence around social emotional learning. So how are they taking what we know our kids need and ensuring they're hitting those high leverage skills of our competencies around social emotional learning. So if you have a class of elementary students and you're recognizing that your students need support in the area of self-awareness, how are you looking at those skills that define self-awareness and ensuring that you are providing those students with experiences to secure that skill? And so that's been a big component of our learning this year around social emotional learning. The other piece around SEL is that there is, I know Sue has mentioned this, a state legislative requirement that districts are screening students around their social emotional skills. So in the upcoming months, we will be implementing that universal screener and working with schools to ensure that we are utilizing that very important data to continue that work and aligning kids' needs with what we're doing in those classrooms. Okay, so that's just a little bit around all of those areas of focus, what we're doing. It's much more detailed. I can go on and on and on, but that's a brief snapshot of what we are doing day to day in special ed.
Katie, are you reporting back to the state on that assessment? Or is that numbers we're turning back over to them?
So we are continuing to find out about that. We don't have an exact answer as to what we are reporting to the state or how we are reporting to them that we are complying with that legislative action. So that is actually a conversation that we had today and are seeking those answers to ensure that we know that before we take that next step. So again, we're not there yet, but that is part of our what are we doing to ensure we're in compliance with that legislative action.
What sort of progress have we been making on the achievement gap? We've been looking at this for a while.
Yeah. So we continue to, I would say we continue to, in Simsbury, our achievement gap is our special education students are very close to the general education population of the state. So we continue to close that gap. So our students in special education services are performing closer to the general education population of state averages. And we have such high performing learners here in Simsbury that's sometimes there is quite a significant gap there. And we continue to look at what are ways through our goals and objectives to close that. So we have made progress in the areas of English language arts. We've seen slight closure there. With math, we're looking at what are the direct services we need to continue to make those small amounts of gains.
What's the ultimate goal?
To work ourselves out of the job in special ed? No, I say that in a facetious way, but that really is it, right? We want to be able to close those gaps and say our students with identified disabilities don't need specialized instruction. They may need accommodations, but may not that instruction because they are performing, they have access to and are performing similarly to their typical peers. So I didn't mean to be fresh in my
No,
response to
I-
Todd, but
I didn't take that
that's
as
really
fresh,
what
I
it
took
was.
that as an honest and wonderful answer. I'm just like, when we work towards that, we'll miss you. But I just like,
I'm on the Janet side.
Todd's getting his face slipped right now.
I don't know, I mean, it's just like, I mean, what.
That's the individual component, is on each individual basis, we look to work those students back to that gen ed, that they're meeting those state standards, that they are meeting all of their skills and they're not no longer approaching and or needing to really find some traction and success in those areas. So it is around the individual. It's continuing to keep our teachers at the individual level through their plans and their goals. But as Sue said, it is, we would love to work ourselves out of a job, but there's a lot of factors that go into our students' needs and learning difficulties.
Sue, before Todd shows you the door, can I ask a question? Does that gap, is it consistent with the gen ed side? Is it?
It is.
And again, we keep returning back to math in this gap, and this board has talked about this a lot.
Yeah.
Any update there we can talk about, or any?
No, I think it's continuing to work on our continuous improvement plans with very focused math goals and objectives and certain supports, and balancing that out with where we are in our environments right now, which we didn't think we would still be in,
Sure,
right?
absolutely. Absolutely.
That's the other response to that, but I'm happy at some point in the near future to provide a full math update. But we're trending in what Katie's talking, it's so important to have in these individualized education plans for identified students goals that align with a general education standard. Otherwise, you're just still maybe moving forward, but you're not closing the gap, you're just maintaining it. Right, so it's making that pivot shift so we start incremental closures of those gaps. And we've seen some wonderful individual successes in that.
And Katie, you're seeing it more through language arts.
We have, but again, the focus this year, I think what Sue just said, and to your question, Jeff, is we very much are seeing the same gap between our general education students and our special education students. So those graphs, if you layer them on top of each other, that gap between math and English language arts is very consistent between the general education students and the special education students. So we have put a focus on that English language arts and special education over the last few years, and now we turn that attention to math and really say, how do we look at these standards and ensure that as those standards increase, we're also not just increasing our goals and objectives based on that individual student performance, but in connection to the standard. So again, that it's going this way, not just kind of stepping along in regards to those skills. So that's really been a focus of some professional development, again, as we are able to with everything else going on, but to give teachers time to look at those pieces.
Has the last couple of years been even harder on working towards this achievement gap and students?
I think it's the amount of what we would say is regression or need for services because of the pandemic. I'm not seeing quite the impact I think that some of us were thinking there could be. However, as I get into the next slides, you will see the impact of the pandemic on students with previously identified needs is creating, there is a documented and there's data that it is making it more, it's harder for them. So if they had a intellectual disability prior to the pandemic, they've been instructed through that pandemic, they're more likely to have some mental health or depression, anxiety, those kinds of needs. So it is closely related, and as I turn to this next component, I think you'll see that it does put our students with special education needs at a higher risk because of those pandemic and those experiences of isolation they've experienced.
So you can see we're not great about holding our questions.
That's okay. That's okay. It makes sense. So as I said, it was important to Pupil Services and to our administrators as well as our teachers that we took time to really highlight this focus of youth mental health and what that's meant to the pupil services department, but also our schools in general. And so I don't know, I'm sure you all are aware, you've seen it in the headlines, you've heard it on the news. Youth mental health is a significant concern. As recently as December 7th, the Surgeon General actually issued a warning around the youth mental health needs and that we needed to be aware of. And it was surprising to see that, but at the same time it was nice because it was the first time we're seeing data around what is impacting our kids post-pandemic. We all see it, it's all anecdotal, right? This was data around what is nationally happening and what are clinicians seeing. And some of that, if you haven't had a chance to review it, is that there's a significant increase of students in high school having persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness. There's an increased risk of suicide in youth. There's some significant rise in anxiety and depression of students K-12 age. And, also as I just mentioned, there is that increased risk of mental health needs for students that had previously identified risks. So that could be special education services, previously having a mental health need, having significant cognitive issues, or even being from, a minority group or lower income, some of the socioeconomic components as well. All of those yield significant higher risk of some mental health needs during and now hopefully post-pandemic. Okay? But I think the key piece of our message tonight is, what does that look like right now in Simsbury? What are we seeing with our students, and how is this really coming to life in regards to our response and support of students? So these were some critical data points that I thought were worth mentioning. As you will see, what is the clinical needs of our students as we identify through our plans? 44% of our students that have special education plans have social, emotional, or behavioral goals and therefore services. They are being seen regularly by a social worker or school psychologist around a social, emotional, or behavioral skill. 70% of our 504 plans are for students with a mental and health or behavioral medical diagnosis. So that is anxiety, that's depression, OCD, ADHD, eating disorders. There's a high percentage, and with that comes clinical needs as well as accommodations through that 504 plan. So that's a significant amount of our students requiring mental health supports in our school.
What would you see pre-pandemic? What would those percentages look like?
So Sue and I worked through some of the data she had done just prior to pandemic, and that was around a significant increase that we saw in those mental health 504 diagnoses at the high school level. It was not quite to that percentage, but it was on a significant rise and was well over 50%. So pre-pandemic in grades 9 through 12, we were seeing this increased, especially in females, an increase of mental health medical diagnoses that were needing and requiring 504 plans to support through accommodations, but also those clinical supports provided by our school counselors, social workers, and school psychologists. So that goes to that national data point of, if you were predisposed to a mental health need prior, it's now increased, and that kind of goes hand in hand with that. This, though, the 70% is a district-wide data piece.
So this is not just the high school, this is K-12.
This is K-12.
Yeah.
This is K-12 of 504 plans.
We're seeing some creep at earlier ages to Katie's point now.
Thank you.
The other clinical need that we see in our a rise in our students is that unfortunate need to provide support and assessment around self-harm and suicidal ideation. Our clinical staff, they provide risk assessment to students that voice self-harm or suicidal ideation, and anecdotally they are reporting an increase of those reports and needing to deal with that, and that's the collaboration with the family, that's collaboration with outside medical providers, ensuring that we keep our students safe that voice these concerns. Okay?
So Katie, on that one, is that a difference? Is that more now than it was before?
So
So
it's
2019 compared to
Yeah, our clinicians are reporting that they are having more of these assessments needing to be completed where they're hearing of a concern or a student is reporting this need. And then they're having to process through, we have an assessment that we use for that to ensure that students are safe and that they have the resources they need if they've voiced or that it's been reported around self-harm. And yes, the clinicians at our buildings are reporting an increase in those assessments that they're completing.
Could part of that be, do you think that there's more awareness and people talk about it more, so people are, there's more reports?
I do. I mean, I think that's a positive of this is
Yeah.
you have friends that are recognizing if someone is, if a friend of theirs is saying something or they've noticed a change in behavior or they're reporting that. So it is an increase of acknowledgement that if you need something, we need to say something. So that is definitely a positive that our students are more aware and helping and being on the lookout for each other.
And are they reporting, do they know who to report to, the kids who are worried about a friend? Do they know who to talk to?
I think at the end of the day, it's that trusted adult.
Yeah.
So that's the education and training we provide our staff. So even if they're reporting it to their classroom teacher knows the
who to get to.
seriousness and they are getting it to a mental health clinician.
Yeah.
If a student is, very close to a paraprofessional that they work with or someone that they see in the office, they can go to that person and they know then who to take it to in order to get the support they need for that student. So we do see that kind of, that process happening a lot, whereas kids have a trusted adult, they know they can go, and then we've trained our adults to recognize and who do we get those concerns to.
Because after all, that's what's important is that
Exactly.
it gets reported.
As
Yeah.
long as they're
They
reporting
tell
it,
somebody.
we know then what to do.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. Another piece that I think is extremely important for us to look at is referrals to special education. So I did a 6-year, it's about a 5.5-year look back because 21-22 is just through the month of December of what are our referrals to special education historically. You'll see in 2020, 2021, there was an increase. We expected that. We only had 3/4 of the year where we were taking referrals and able to evaluate students based on referral to special education in 2019-2020. So 2020, 2021, we expected to see an increase in referrals due to the pandemic, due to closure, and that was and we were making up all of those evaluations that we missed in the spring of 1920. But to date this year, we have as many referrals to special education as we had in the entire year of 2017-2018. So that's only the months of September, October, November, and December, and we still have all of the spring and really seeing how kids are reacting and responding to intervention. So it's a data point that we're watching and is something that I think is indicative of those needs. A lot of those referrals are in the areas of social, emotional, and behavior that we are seeing an increase, and then what does that impact on academics? That's what our teams are trying to evaluate and look at.
Those referrals, are they coming from staff only, or are they coming from doctors, parents?
It's parents and staff referrals to special education. So there's 2 different ways you can refer to special education. It can be a parent referral, and then it can also be that team or school-based referral. So it is both, and I think it's recognition that both our school teams and our families recognize when there's a need in a student, and then we take that and we look at it and evaluate it. The last key piece of data that we continue to monitor is attendance. We see there is a percentage of students that have significant concerns with school attendance or chronic absenteeism. And when you look at chronic absenteeism, that has usually a strong connection to mental health needs. And it's a significant demand on our clinical staff to support those students and their families in securing attendance and ensuring that the student feels comfortable and safe coming to school. So that's another piece of data that we continue to look at. And so that is just a little bit of how that youth mental health component is looking in Simsbury right now.
Katie, can you just, sorry, I should have asked this earlier, but on the referrals, I think for this year it was like a slightly over 100. Just trying to extrapolate, would you expect it to get to that sort of 250 level again?
we were having that conversation yesterday, and yes, I think we do. But again, we're trying to make some adjustments with our intervention processes and how do we meet kids where they're at in order to support them prior to referral. So with where we're at right now, there's a potential yes, but again, it's how do we continue to adjust and meet the kids through that intervention process.
Do most of your referrals end up with a 504 and IEP, or some of them deemed better handled through other avenues?
I don't think, it's hard to say, I don't have a percentage for you in front of me. I don't think the word most is fair. I would say a high percentage of them do end with some sort of a plan, but some of them we need to look through the intervention process, and we need more data around those interventions that they've been a part of. How, if we're seeing progress in those interventions, we don't necessarily need to move towards an evaluation and or a plan through our special education referral process.
Thank you.
So I've referred a lot to our clinical team or our mental health professionals. Who are these people and what do we have in place to support our students currently? So up here I've put kind of who the people I refer to. Those are our school psychologists. We have currently we have 2 at Simsbury High School, 1 at the middle school. We have 1 in each of our elementary schools, 2 at Squadron. Our school social workers, as you can see, we've added some school social workers over time. We have 2 at the high school, 1 at the middle school, and currently we have 3 at the elementary school. And then our school counselors, we have 11, and those are at the secondary level. Those are our school and guidance counselors. And the last important component of our support, our personnel support, is our behavior coaches, and that's a paraprofessional position that really works closely with those school psychologists and school social workers to provide some proactive behavioral interventions for kids and structures. So they might be the people that would go and give kids some proactive breaks, or rewards if kids have earned something, so that kids are on some behavioral support plan. They're really key components in enacting some of those behavioral interventions that some of our students with needs require. And we currently have a behavior coach at the middle school and 1 at each of our elementary schools. The other pieces that fall into that mental health support umbrella is that SEL work. And our school psychologists and social workers are huge into that social emotional learning work as consultants. They act as the people that are advising our teachers, advising our teams around what do students need in the classroom to get to those core social emotional learning competencies. So I mentioned self-awareness earlier. If a teacher has a question about how to better provide instruction around self-awareness, they're going to go to that school psychologist or school social worker to get some ideas and to have that person do some observations to help them provide some classroom environmental tier 1 supports to students around behavior and social emotional skills. So they're key components within that social emotional learning curriculum and content and scope and sequence that we provide. The other piece that we kind of call would fit under that umbrella is some of our programs and structures of support that we provide students. And that brings me to our presenters this evening that I'm so excited to share, and that is our Pathways program. It's a program that is at Simsbury High School. And it's, so I'd actually like to welcome Will up and get settled as I go into a little bit around that history and the vision of our Pathways program. So Pathways has been at Simsbury High School for many years. It started as an alternate education setting and has developed over the years to meet students' needs. Where they're at, what do we see in our population, and what does that look like? So about 3 years ago, we really took a close look at what does Pathways need to support our students at Simsbury High School. And that's where we increased the focus around clinical support and mental health. They need that academic support, but they also needed a clinical support. So we were fortunate enough that Will came on board, and we were able to really build this around an academic, a general education academic component, as well as that clinical component. So our current team is a special education teacher, We're fortunate enough to have content general education teachers that come into the program and teach courses. We have a social worker that works with that program at up to 50% of his time. Jovan Gerard, he's here this evening. And currently we have 14 students in our program that have individualized needs that this program, through the supports, through what we're so proud of, work at every day to support these kids in the vision of the graduate, to get them where they need to be and to recognize their strengths, their successes, and how they're going to be great adults as they move forward. So with that, I have this evening Will Leslie, special education teacher, Jovan Gerard, school social worker, Shira Flowers, English teacher, and Jackson Hooper, who's our current 12th grade student. So Will, I'm going to turn it to you.
I need to bring this closer now.
That would be great, Will. Thank
All right. So thanks so much for letting me talk a little bit about life on the path, as we refer to it affectionately. Just one of our shorthands as far as how we talk back and forth. Kitty shared a little bit of our history, how we've gotten to where we are. The reality is that we couldn't have gotten here without an administration with a great vision for where we were headed. And we've made some good strides in the past 3 years. There's no question about it. That has happened because of the work that was done by the team that you see here this evening and many others, and I would be remiss. I know there's some that are watching tonight, so a shout out to all of them that have worked so hard this year, and I appreciate it. So that continues because of the support that the dedicated team has been able to receive. The reality is that change is hard, except that change seems to be the only thing that's constant on the path. The Pathway student doesn't allow for a standard approach to instruction or support. Just when it appears that something is working for one of our students, they like to mix it up a little bit. And then we have to rethink everything, which is fine. That's what we love to do. But what is standard for our students is a relationship. The reality is that we can't make any headway with our students unless they know that we truly care. Obviously, that's true for all of our educators, but in our case, it is something that we're working really hard as far as building our community. Pathways and the staff in the program are always finding ways and working through ways to build that community and meet the dynamic needs of students. If we can be successful in building it, the change that our individual students need will come quickly and organically. Yeah, thank you. So in the next few minutes, I want to introduce you to that team that Katie introduced already to tell you a bit about our program. I'm going to take a moment to talk about our vocational training. The training remains an area of growth for staff and students, especially as the workforce changes with technology and the circumstances around the pandemic. Ms. Flowers, our teacher in English on the path, she'll explain how regular education teachers, along with our special education team, provide attention between those two forces that's encouraging excellence while allowing for an increase in the access and increase in accommodations so that students can achieve. It's definitely a push and pull between both special education and regular education. Mr. Gerard, the social worker, he will explain how his role as a counselor supports the students through individual sessions and supports the staff down in Pathways to help us understand how the milieu is always changing with students and how we have to accommodate what is happening as far as the interplay between our different students. And then I will come back and I'll tell you a little bit more about how we're collaborating with parents and supporting them. So in regard to that vocational class, it's designed to prepare students for what comes after high school. Students may be preparing for college, trade school, or finding a way to enter the workforce successfully. So the classes that we're creating focus on college and career readiness with a focus on critical thinking, collaboration, creativity, and public speaking. Therefore, we have a student that's going to do some public speaking. Real world maintenance is, what does it look like to hunt for an apartment or manage a social media in an appropriate and productive way? Resume writing, self-exploration. We want to work and help them build their character, manage their emotions, and then to create opportunities to demonstrate grit and perseverance. And lastly, and just as important, is financial readiness. The high school already has a financial literacy program that they have to do, but because of the nature of what we're doing, it's something that I think that we have to hit on every year as we work with our students. So we're working on budgeting, saving, spending, understanding credit and debit, and how to prepare for retirement. The reality is like I said, vocational class has been something that has been evolving over time. Jackson can tell you tonight that when I first started, we were doing a lot of job reports. These are mundane, they are not engaging. It's an internet search that tells you how much you make and what the requirements are. It's just not a lot of fun. But because these are so tedious, we've moved away from those with a focus on real world problems and solutions. This was difficult during the pandemic, as you might imagine, trying to put these kinds of things in place in a Google Classroom. So it continues to evolve and continues to grow. I will tell you that I do hope in the long run that we will be looking at some more internships and maybe some functional activities that we can do within the program that will help them to support in that learning. So I am going to ask my teacher and my social worker to come up, but obviously you all are not shy about asking questions, so I don't want to keep you from doing that, and then I will come back, so you won't lose me if I walk away.
And just before Kira and Jovan come up, it's important to mention, and I kind of glossed over this. This is a program for students with special education needs, but also some students with general education needs that really are at a point where they need that alternate education experience that involves these components. So as Shira and Jovan kind of detail the program more, please keep that in mind that of these 14 students, it's both special education and general education students.
So hello, I'm Shira Flowers. Thank you for having us here tonight. I want to talk about our academic model in Pathways. So as you can see, our academic model is based on 3 principles: support, excellence, and access. Support means offering differentiated learning and assessment. Excellence means finding, recognizing, and celebrating the talents and passions of each of our students. And access means providing enhanced and continued opportunities for students to revisit, work on, go deeper with missed and struggling content and assessments. In Pathways, we have 5 subject teachers, and this year Will provided us with the directive that each of us should pick something that we're passionate about to inspire our work with our students. The result has been a system of project-based learning experiences in which students both develop discipline-specific content knowledge and skills and make interdisciplinary connections. So one of my personal and academic interests is the study of American musical theater. And I've provided several opportunities for students to connect classic and contemporary texts to Broadway musicals. Other teachers have engaged students in projects in money management, current events, and house constructions. There's also been a very popular physics experiment which involves eggs, insulating materials, and a 3rd floor stairwell. So perhaps the most meaningful activities are those that allow students to make connections between subjects. So this marking period, I taught Greek mythology, and at the same time I led students through the music, history, and the staging of Anais Mitchell's Hadestown. At the same time, Latin teacher Drew Warchett had his students create a website with the goal of providing a user-friendly guide to the gods, the myths, and the holidays in the Roman and Greek world. It's our goal in the academic focus of the path to provide these students with a vision of themselves taking on further study and work experiences in areas that interest them.
Hi, good evening. My name is Joe Majority, School Social Worker at Simsbury High School. As Katie shared earlier, I work with mainstream students as well as with Pathways. So just to start off, when I first learned about the opportunity to work with Pathways, I was very excited. I knew that the opportunity would provide me to work directly with staff and students to implement clinical work while building a therapeutic alliance. To piggyback on what Ms. Wesley shared earlier, we as human beings thrive the most with relationships. So let's talk about these 3 key areas. Firstly, with the individual. Within Pathways, we support students demonstrating either emotional or behavioral needs. Each day is a new day, and each day there's a new way to strive towards being the best version of yourselves. So we encourage students to develop strategies to be accountable, advocate, and as I said earlier, be the best version of themselves. Meeting them where they are at is very important. This signifies seeing the individual for being unique and for having their own strength and way of thinking. And for the group portion, students are paired with their counterparts, their peers that have similar needs, whether emotional or behavioral. The goal is to have students realize their capabilities and empower them to feel safe, to share feelings or thoughts that not only they but others may be feeling simultaneously that they may not have been able to share before. And for the family component, parent meetings are happening quarterly, which I give Mr. Wesley a lot of credit because we have seen significant changes in the ability to support the students. So this tool creates constant communication, the opportunity for updates, and the final piece that helps us at Pathways to provide wraparound services between the clinical piece with therapeutic intervention as well. In those moments when it feels as though we are pushing the students to strive for better, it is because we believe and we care that they can be successful in life. And lastly, I want to end with my portion of a quote, which is by John Wooden. Don't let what you cannot do interfere with what you can do. Thank you.
So the reality is that when Pathways is successful, it's because of the groundwork that the staff and administration in years past has laid down. But at the same time, it's successful when we're working with our families and with our partnering with the parents. We knew early on that we would need a strong parent engagement. And so initially that meant a strong focus on communication. Our team, oftentimes me, but through my whole team, there were large group emails that were going out on a regular basis. A significant amount of time was spent on the phone communicating with families. And we were lucky enough, even in the first year of Pathways, to hold 2 in-person meetings. An initial meet and greet for the new special ed teacher, and then moving forward a discussion around social media, but more specifically phone use and how that was impacting teens and our program in general. It has continued to grow in regard to the education and skill building. At this point, we've been able to develop a monthly newsletter that is sent out. It provides programmatic highlights as well as opportunities to provide resources for building skill and support. This year, as Mr. Gerard mentioned, the quarterly meetings have started. I have to tell you, in my first year there were times that parents wouldn't be present for IEP meetings and such things as that, but we've been able to, the first quarter, not only did we have everybody attend their PPT, but we had every student have a parent or guardian show up for a quarterly meeting. It was a significant change, and I was very thrilled. In this quarter, we've had all but one family make that happen. So, and we've got a week left. So, those are things that have been put in place. In the years to come, we hope to provide a parent seminar or parent trainings, as well as maybe a quarterly parent support group to build that same kind of community in and amongst the parents. So, now I want to take a moment to introduce you to Jack. He's been with the Pathways program at Simsbury High School for 3 years, and I could spend the remainder of our time telling you all the ways in which he's grown in the time that I've known him. Instead, I've asked him to come and share just a little bit of his own story in his own words. So I'll turn it over to you, Jack.
Thank you. I've grown a lot since I started in Pathways 3 years ago. It was very difficult for me in freshman year. I was, starting fights with my teachers. I was hiding work. I was, skipping classes. And I joined Pathways the next year, and I was able to work on assignments at my own pace and in ways that made sense to me, and I was able to succeed far easier and far more frequently. I was able to accomplish a lot of my goals through Pathways since I could put more effort into my schoolwork. There's a theory that everything in life is like either a glass or a rubber ball. You can drop the rubber ball and it'll bounce back up the next day, but if you drop the glass ball, it'll shatter and you have to pick up all the pieces. When I joined Pathways, I was able to keep the glass balls in the air, my head above the water on schoolwork for the first time in years, and I was able to get anything done for once in my life. I could put more time into doing what I enjoyed and what I needed to do outside of school as well. I had a friend who helped me understand what Pathways was at the start because I was very apprehensive when I was offered a spot in the classroom. I gave it a try, and I spent some time in the classroom, and I was comfortable with my ability to succeed in and out of school. I was able to get a good grade without struggling, and it was the confidence boot I really needed. In Pathways, I made a lot of friends who understood what I was struggling with, because not a lot of people understood what it was like to not be too smart to fail, but just not be able to do what people want you to do. I made a lot of friends outside of Pathways this year as well, because I was brought into a classroom outside of the building by Ms. Flowers. And I found that there was a lot of people in the school who did understand, and I just hadn't had the chance to meet them yet. I was able to meet teachers and students who could point me in the right direction to opportunities that were available in and outside of the school building that I hadn't been able to see in Pathways. I met a lot of teachers and students that were really helpful to me. Right now, I'm just trying to save up money to pay for surgery and maybe to go to some classes next year. I'd like to get CPR certified in the next couple years. I'm working towards getting my driver's license as well. I still struggle to get started on assignments and follow through with them, but every time I get stuck, there is a teacher in Pathways who can help me out.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Jack, for sharing your story with you. I could go on and on about how proud I am of him. He's seen a lot of growth in the last 3 years that I've known him. What you may not know is Jack is actually the creator of our logo here this evening.
Well done.
Yeah.
Created it this year to go onto the monthly newsletter, and then we actually also placed it on some swag that went out to students as holiday gifts.
Swag is always good.
Oh, okay, all right. You'll be on the list. I know if you continue on your path that you're going to be doing some great things. What I do ask is that you'll keep in touch with us, that you'll let us know what's going on, and I will reach out if you don't, I promise. With that being said, I actually spoke to another student. My first year in Pathways, Jose was a senior. He was a force to be reckoned with. Had been there long enough so he knew what he needed to do, but very charismatic, very outgoing, also very opinionated, and didn't really know what he was going to do with the new guy that was taking over. He was full of hope and had big dreams for the future. I spoke with his mom and him, and she told me, and I quote, "He's realizing that being an adult isn't always fun." He's in his second year of school at the Universal Technical Institute. He works at the auto shop in the morning and is a server at Applebee's in the evening. He said he was grateful for Pathways, and that, again, I quote, "You guys pushed me to do it." So the reality is that we have a wide variety of student that comes through. Sometimes it's anxiety, sometimes it's more behavioral. Whatever it might be, we want to work to create that community, to create a safe place for them to be that has that tension that pushes them forward, but makes sure that they know that they're safe and that they have people to rely on. So thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. We're certainly available if you have questions, and I appreciate it very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I just want to say it seems like you have built a fabulous community among your Pathways family.
Yeah.
And I'm very impressed and so happy to hear from Jack and that Jose has had such growth outside of school. So thank you all for your hard work.
The other thing, if I could just add on to what Sue just said, I think what's also important is it helps the community to know that you're here. And I think that's what I appreciate. And I appreciate you hearing my interest in them. And so, Jack, good luck. But hopefully others will come through as well. So thank you for tonight, really.
The size of the program, do you keep it at the size that it is now, because that's the most effective size for what we have in the resources that we have? Are you looking to hopefully expand it?
It's something that we're always going to look at, but I think the current size is really meeting the needs of our students right now within the high school realm, but also if we would need more, we really have to kind of keep it at that size. We'd have to look at resources because we need to keep it at that size to provide the individualized supports and services that Pathways provides through the program. So it's a little bit of both. Right now, we're meeting the needs of our students. That much I can say very true within that 14. We typically look that program can't get much larger than 14, 15, 16 because of the resources and ensuring that we're able to provide those individualized supports. So I appreciate you guys allowing us to bring Pathways to this presentation this evening. It was a personal pick of mine, and my former role at the high school as the supervisor. Will and I and the program worked hand in hand to meet what our students need. And Jack, I was there in 9th grade. I know how it was for you, and I can't imagine how proud your parents are of you this evening, but also how proud your team is of you this evening, because you are a 12th grader who recognizes your strengths, who knows what your vision is for your future, and will continue to utilize your team to make sure you get there. So thank you, all of you, for the work you do and for being here this evening.
And one more thing. I mean, I know we were kidding around before about the ultimate goal of what we're trying to do, but it's not just about the achievement gap. It's about this kind of programming and support that everyone's going to always need, and maybe the needs will change, but when you've got the talented department that we have, we can meet these challenges. So thank you for everything, on the Pathways and on everything that you're doing.
And that's why we took the time this evening to really bring forth the mental health supports and what our teams do bring. I appreciate the word talent. We have the best people in our department. I've had the advantage personally of working in multiple states, and I've never seen a team as strong as the department we have here in Simsbury. And they truly work with our families. They understand and recognize the importance of collaborating with our students' parents, and as our students get older, with our students, and having them be a part of that process. And it's so hugely important and critical to the success. And it is defined more than just test scores. It's that full vision of the graduate. I remember when we first started getting into the vision of the graduate, I was like, this is awesome for special ed, because at the end of the day, that's what we want to be able to check around our special education students as well as our general education students. So.
And even the awareness that we talked about in people reporting, that's part of what you're doing here too, is to make sure that people understand what we can do.
And I think the success of the program is the fact that what Will was saying before about when he first started, parents wouldn't come out, but now they come out and they're to the meetings, and I think that's a testament to the good work that you're doing. The other question that I do have is that you mentioned that about wraparound services, and so talk a little bit about that and how are you able to connect those services, because knowing what we have in town versus out.
So it's a lot of what Joven does is understanding the outside and making relationships with student services that they're receiving outside of school. So what are those mental health services or clinical supports that families have connected them with? And then if they don't have that connection, what resources can we provide, or in-town community-based resources can we provide? Will mentioned that we're looking to get into some parent trainings. How do we, our role as educators and special educators doesn't stop at the school door. It really goes into that comprehensive collective teamwork to support students. And so I think it's an integral part of what Joven does day in and day out to understand the student supports they're receiving outside, to work with them, to collaborate so that we're all talking about the same thing. And secondly is to really look at what supports can we provide our parents around what's working for us or what they might need or what resources are out there, and to continue to provide that for kids.
Because in the end, if we help the parents and educate the parents, then when they leave, they're armed with what's needed as well. So that's wonderful.
And it's getting not just the parents, but then eventually the kids, because they're the ones that at 18 are going to be making those doctor's appointments or are going to be finding those resources. And it's, yes, they have parents and they have a teaching team that will always be there to answer those questions, but providing them with those life skills that they need to get out there to make those changes and to make those successes.
Yes. Absolutely great.
So
we talk about the silver lining of the pandemic. Do you think that the increase in attendance around your PPTs and your quarterly meetings have they been virtual? Does that come into play in this?
I think some of the virtual ability to participate is important, but I also think I would attribute, especially in Pathways, if we're isolating with Pathways, it's the relationships and the communications. The amount of work that Will and his team put in over the last 2.5 years to ensure that parents knew they were there, that they are there as a support line for their kids, but also those families there's students that I can tell you it was
so hard to get that family involvement the first year that are still in the program, and now they are, like Will said, 100% attendance. That is critical to our team, and our parents work together.
That's a big credit to you.
Virtual is a plus, and I would say if you're looking at overall PPT attendance, yes, it has helped, but with Pathways, it's that connection and that communication.
It's really nice to have Jack's parents here today.
I was going
Appreciate
to
you coming.
say, remiss not to mention that they have been consistent in their attendance.
Thank you for being
It's
here.
very nice to have you.
Yes, thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, so feel free as you need to, because what we're gonna get into next is really the how do we continue to row through Successful Waters? How do we fund these programs and supports? And also, what's a little bit of a look into the needs around our ever-changing needs? So with that, I think it's important to start the budget conversation, and as you keep in mind the programs we're putting in place and also those mental health needs of our students, a look at our population data. So this is a 9-year comparison between October of 2012 and the last time we don't have the 10-1 count yet from the state. So this is 10-1 of 20, and that is our total number of students enrolled at that point to now. The total number has decreased by 577. The total number of special ed students has increased over that same period of time by 64. So as we see a declining enrollment, we see an increase in special education students. And so that's a little bit of a sample of where our impact and our needs have grown over the years. The next piece is since we don't have that 10-1 of 21 count, this is an example of what we're seeing in the summer, that move-in data. We all know that real estate market in Simsbury has been moving and bustling, and so what does that look like? The first column you'll see is the total number of move-in students in each of our buildings. The second number is of those students, what students require special education services. You'll see in this number that some of our buildings were significantly, that percentage of students that moved in with IEPs or special education needs was high. For example, at Henry James, they had 39 new students. 11 of those 39 had special education services when they moved in. That's over 25%. Latimer Lane was at a similar rate. The third column is the percentage of those students that move in with special education needs that require a significant need. And significant need is defined as a need for paraprofessional access, direct paraprofessional support, so one-on-one support, out-of-district placement, and or significant high service delivery hours, time with a special educator. So you'll see, again, various buildings were impacted differently, but in some of our buildings, up to 60% of those students that moved in with special education needs required significant support. And again, that just, it's a glance into the changes of our population and of those special education needs. So with all of this information, there are some changes that we need to look at providing, and some supports that we'd like to request. Some of these will have an impact on the operating budget, but some of these will be funded through grants and other various changes of roles and positions. So we don't want to create a cliff. We're not asking for all of these to be applied through the operating budget. Neil and Mr. Curtis will provide a much more global look into how this is impactful, but we just wanted to give you an introduction to how we see some of the changes that we are seeing within our department to support the ever-changing needs of our students. So the first is, as you can probably guess, is around mental health needs. We currently have, as I mentioned, 3 social workers at the elementary level. And when we look at the needs of our students, we really need to increase that social work support, and are looking to add 2 additional social workers to our elementary structure so that we have 1 in each building to really address the ever-changing needs of students on the day-to-day and to increase that family collaboration and communication. The other structure that we need to take a look at is the supervisory structure that we currently have in place. We currently have 1 supervisor over elementary special education, and we're looking to change that system and redefine the roles into 3 department supervisors. And what this will allow us to do is to increase building-based leadership around special education for those increased high-demand student needs and cases, the PPT support, the support around referrals, the ability to really close loops around answers and problem solving to support students' needs in a behavioral way or a social emotional way or an academic way quickly, efficiently. And this also allows, our school psychologists are currently doing a lot of that work. They're currently providing a lot of that building-based leadership around special education. And by providing this structure, it allows our school psychologists to really dedicate their time to those clinical needs of seeing kids, consulting with teachers around social emotional learning, and evaluating our students' needs. So it's a twofold. It gets support into the buildings and answers quickly to our teams. It also frees up that mental health support and need of our school psychologists. Another area where we see is our school psychologists look to fulfill some hours around those increased evaluations that you saw. Referrals are up. We've got to look at how do we get those the evaluations and the assessments completed appropriately. And the last 2 that you'll see up here are really around that increase of student population in special education and balancing caseload increases. So some special education staffing and contracted services around speech and language support. Those are the 2 areas we see a need. So like I said, there'll be more to come of how that's proposed and funded, but this is a look into how we see meeting the ever-changing needs of our students in special education.
Katie, how do you see using 3 department supervisors among 5 schools?
Yep, so it's looking at, we have a similar structure currently at our secondary level. And when I look at the amount of students in special education at, for example, Henry James, there's about 100 students with special education needs at Henry James. So if we look at our elementary schools, we can do, Squadron has about 100 students at in special education. So you put a supervisor there. And then between the other 4 schools is you can split them. So a supervisor would share 2 schools and have about 100 students in special education with the same amount of teachers and staff to support. So it becomes pretty equal across the district around responsibilities. So it would be 1 at Squadron.
Dedicated full-time.
Dedicated full-time, and then 1 between 2 of our elementaries that balance out, and then the other 2. So there would be shared support, but it's so much more than Nancy Forsberg is amazing, and if we could clone her, we would. But she's trying to run between all 5 of those elementary schools and provide that leadership and support to our teams and parents that are asking questions and needing answers and needing follow-up around special education laws and services and ideas and supports. And it just is not enough to provide our teams what they need in order to support kids right there in the moment. And this structure will get us there.
So it slows down the process.
It does.
Completely bogs it down.
And it breaks down communication sometimes, and it's putting people in unfortunate situations, and we're not able to be as efficient and effective as we can be if we get those answers right then and there about how we can support kids.
And that affects the student.
Right,
Yeah.
so Nancy has 300 cases, essentially.
She's about 250, yeah.
Now, before you went into the pathways, you had made a comment about the psychologists, and you had said that there are, correct me if I'm wrong, there was 1 at Henry James, and then there are 2 at Squadron, 2 at the high school, and then 1 sporadically, I don't know how.
At the other elementaries.
At the elementaries. My question is that how, if the psychologist, when you talked about it earlier, you said that they support the teachers too, and how they were, at Henry James, I would imagine, and I don't know if this is right, but we have a lot more teachers at Henry James than we do at Squadron. And so how does Henry James have enough with only 1 psychologist there?
So that's part of those contracted services that we look at, is that we need some help in the areas of evaluations to free up the time so that school psychologist has more time for consultation. I will say, knowing the middle school model really well, teams help with that, because you have those team meetings where our mental health, our social worker or our school psychologist can get to those meetings, provide that consultation,
because again, you'll sometimes see themes that run through a team. So it might be a group of kids and we're really struggling with, I'll go with the social emotional competency of self-awareness. How can we do this better? They can speak to those teams, provide that consultation, and then kind of step away and let the team work together around how they embed that in their environment. So the team structure definitely helps with that consult component.
Jen, I'll say the other thing that also is different at the middle school as compared to the elementary is you have school counseling staff too.
Thank you.
So those 3 school counselors in conjunction with the social worker, in conjunction with the behavior coach, in conjunction with the school psychologist, form a support services staff. That is a unique structure, there being just one middle school with that staff. So they definitely collaborate very frequently on these support needs.
So I was going to go back to what Jen said, though. Is that a true statement about the numbers being more at one than the other?
Right, FTE count, it's extraordinarily close.
Okay.
Between every change in schedule.
5 classes
Okay.
in most grades.
Yeah, I just thought it was the teams.
Well,
I would think there'd be
well,
more.
right. That's why I looked at you.
And I will say, to echo Sue, thank you for reminding me of that. Like, that's such a huge component. Those school counselors are your tier 1 experts. They're the ones that are working with your 504 students, whereas the elementary level, your school psychologists are overseeing the 504 plans majority of the time. So they take a chunk of that clinical support at the secondary level that we don't have at the elementary level.
Thank you.
Sorry, Sue. We're both clicking.
Now I'm gonna get out of there. You do your thing. Okay. I was trying to be a good man and I got
Thank you.
my way.
I needed it a few times. Thank you. Okay, so this is a breakdown of what the program cost is total. It's a format that I know you're familiar with, and it really chunks out what are the big buckets of special education costs. You'll see the biggest bucket is in the areas of salaries and benefits. This is about 66% of our overall special education budget. It is up slightly this year due to those insurance and benefit increases that come with salaries and benefit packages. The second major driver of our budget is out-of-district tuitions. That number is holding steady with a bit of a decrease due to graduations and things like that. The third bucket is transportation costs. Transportation costs, we have seen a bit of an increase, and that is due to needing contracted services for routes that our local vendors are typically able to secure, but due to staffing shortages, we've had to look to other places. Everyone has been amazing, but staffing shortages have hit all of our industries, and transportation has been one of those areas where we've had an increase in costs because of need to use different vendors.
So where Neil said we're doing okay, in general, we're not doing okay.
Salters, the hardest challenge with Salters is that to drive the big bus, you gotta have a CDL
license, right.
And so we're doing okay in terms of that, but finding enough like van transportation can be a challenge.
And they're not even able to take that. So what Neil's referring to is like, are they able to staff the buses they commit to every day? They responsibly and respectfully will say, we just can't take this on right now. And in years past, they've been able to take that van run that I'm referring to, a singular van run that we need for a kid. They can't take that on and respectfully have to share, decline, and then we have to look somewhere else to transport that student. So that's what I'm referring to, so I apologize if that was confusing. But it
And that
really
transportation isn't just town-wide transportation.
No, those are our out-of-district.
Yeah.
It's community-based internship transportation. It's all of the components we are responsible to provide through those individualized plans.
I just want to remind people who might be watching.
Just to be clear, in case J.R. Salter's watching.
Yes.
He will take, if there is a student who has services in West Hartford, if JR can do the route, Salters will take the route.
Right.
So it's just a matter of whether he has enough vans and drivers to be able to commit to it.
Yeah. Right.
The other piece too is that in the past, we've worked with other districts. So if another district had a student in an out-of-district placement and we did too, sometimes we would share runs. Now with the pandemic, not really looked upon as a favorable practice,
Yeah.
right? So that has created some additional singletons, or challenges, I should say, and he's been a great partner.
Yeah, great partner, and I that's why I say respectfully and responsibly, just really being open and honest, and when we work so closely with them.
These are just costs that you can specifically allocate to special ed programs, right? So there's still other costs embedded in here. So, I mean, any expense that students have.
So this is our overall
Major
special
drivers.
education budget, and these are the overall buckets that's broken into.
Right. I guess if somebody looks at it and says, you're comparing this percent to the percent of students that have special ed services, it's actually more than this.
Potentially.
Yeah. And then the last component of this is purchase services and supplies. It is a bit of an increase due to the need around some additional contracted services we've required for behavioral supports and needs. We had we have a role in district of BCBA, a board certified behavior analyst. We had 2 open positions for a while. It took a little bit of time to fill. We had to provide contracted services. That's increased that just a bit. And just meeting kids where they're at post-pandemic, we've seen a need to do some different things from contracted services. So overall budget is right around that 24%. That is holding steady though. I think that's been consistent over the last 4 years. So what are our funding sources other than the operating budget? I know you guys are used to seeing IDEA, as I said earlier, and then the excess cost grant. IDEA is a federal grant that is funds that must be used to service students ages 3 to 22 that require special education needs. The majority of our funding is utilized for staffing. There is also an excess cost grant, and what that is if an individual student meets the threshold as determined by the state, Simsbury's is $85,467, we get a reimbursement of anything above that. The average reimbursement rate is around 76%. And we are estimated to receive about $1.7 million from that grant in the upcoming year. There are 2 additional funding sources that we've received in Simsbury due to the federal funds released around supporting student needs in education post-pandemic or during pandemic. And that is the American Rescue Plan Special Ed Grant and the ESSER2 stipend. Special ed stipends, specifically denoted for special education needs. And you'll see those amounts there. And these are really funds that are dedicated to identified students during COVID and providing the additional supports that they're requiring and giving districts some ability to do so. So both of those are funds that we've received in the last, since the summer.
You're speaking up my alley on these things, so this is exactly what I'm going to be reporting out to when I'm in DC next week, because we will be there discussing a lot of these funding sources and meeting with congressional delegations, but we were doing virtual on these things.
Yeah.
And we're very fortunate that our congressional delegation from Connecticut is very supportive of this and has a very good handle on this within Connecticut and with all the school districts in Connecticut. But, I can't say it for all the rest of the country, but they've been very, very good about staying on top of it, and with us too. So anything that we can give them regarding our districts here in Connecticut will only help them as they convene on the Hill.
Well, Lydia, you've shared before that one of the platforms of Connecticut is to get a 100% reimbursement rate as opposed to a 76% reimbursement rate,
yes,
which it's
right.
currently averaging. So that's been really helpful. That's kind of the connective tissue between what you're sharing from that platform and actualized life and how it's living here in Simsbury. So thank you for that.
Absolutely, and it's taking time to get there. I mean, every year we are there, and we fight the fight, with them in DC, because what happens in DC is going to spread out to the rest of the states, and from the individual states on down through the individual districts. So this is something that is very near to all of us on that, but it doesn't just happen overnight, and it's depending on, depending on who's in Congress and depending how hard they fight for the individual states and stuff.
So at the end of the day, I think it's been shared how we continue to row the boat every day. And I just want to thank all of the department, all of the teachers, all of the staff, all of the leaders in this department for everything they do to support our students. So at the end of a very long night, I thank you for all that you do to support us as a department and for asking such important questions that continue to allow us to support our students with all needs, general education, special education, throughout our district. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Sue and Katie, I just have to say thank you for the detail tonight, and definitely for bringing in pathways. That was great. But of course, and I'm happy to hear what we did here tonight about our students and how they're doing around the behavioral health related issues. So thanks so much.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Katie.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks, Katie.
All right, we are back to our second public audience.
Please tell Jack. Katie, please tell Jack we were really impressed.
I will.
Very impressed and really wish him well.
My turn. You still have to state your name. Okay.
I'm Lori Boyko. I live at 15 Oakhurst Road in Simsbury.
I didn't write you all a big dissertation tonight, but in light of tonight's presentation on mental health and behavioral issues, and in response to the comment that Liz made, as a high school parent, I want to express to the whole board some of my personal observations about what appears to be, because I'm looking at it as a parent, disproportionate responses to varying degrees of behavioral indiscretions at the high school level. This is specifically at the high school level. So, for example, in the last 30 days, I personally know of 11 students, 11 individual different students, who have been given detentions for improper mask wearing. So they have been asked to come to detention after school or on a Saturday because their mask had either slipped under their nose or what have you. 8 of the students were at lunch and had not yet put their masks back on after eating their lunch, but they were still at lunch in the cafeteria. So you all know how I feel about masks, but even more importantly, I wonder at that level, why are students being actually given detentions for this? These situations, I spoke to people, so I know what happened, and to my knowledge, they were not followed up by disrespect. They were quickly put their mask back on, yet they were given detentions. And I feel like for otherwise good kids that aren't doing really bad things, that can actually have an adverse effect on their mental health or what they think about themselves. And that's really important at the high school level. On the other hand, what I consider some really serious behaviors, to my knowledge, again, it may be a transparency and communication issue, I don't know. By comparison, the repercussions weren't really reflective necessarily of the behavior that took place. So for kids getting detentions for masks and then some other really serious indiscretions that I don't really know what happened or that they got anything so serious, it seems disproportionate. I don't know if this is a school policy, a Board of Ed policy, a state or federal legal policy. I don't know what parameters are, surrounding that. But my perspective is, as a parent, that I think the Board of Ed in its entirety should be aware and discuss. I mean, I understand as parents we're not privy to all the information, but I think there should be a broader conversation or discussion amongst all of you about what that looks like and why. Thank you.
That's it.
I appreciate that. Thank you. All right.
Am I allowed to do another comment?
Sure.
Yeah, I just figured. Thanks, Elizabeth Peterson. I still live at 32 Foxton.
You haven't moved in the last hour and a half?
Just based on what Lori said, I just want to add some information. I did talk to Mr. Para about these detentions are given for the mask wearing. And I was asking, because this is part of my data tracking, because he didn't know about this guy. I talked to Lori about what happened. And apparently there's teacher detentions. and then there's administrative detentions, and he said he wouldn't even know about the teacher ones. So I don't want to make any accusations, but you kind of wonder, are some teachers going rogue, you know, and they're using their own, and I'm not saying they're right or wrong, and it's not my place to say, but there seems to be inconsistency on how these detentions are being put out, and then the administration at the high school doesn't even know that these are being put out as punishment. And another analogy I wanted to give, because I do talk to Chief Bolter from time to time, I did have discussions with him about when the mask mandates have been in place in Simsbury. He says the point of view that he puts out to the police is that we're trying to educate the community about wearing masks and speaking to them about, you know, can you please put it on, we're with this mask mandate. That just seems to be, as far as the Simsbury vibe, for lack of a better word, seems to be in contradiction to how it's being put out at the high school with these examples of detention. Not like, you know, especially because it's an educational setting, so it's really mind-boggling that they're not, I can understand if the kid is repeatedly doing it, but it doesn't seem to be the case. So I would say it would be nice if there was a standard, particularly at the high school where we're hearing about this. So, thanks.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much. With that, nobody else has anything to say. We will have our next board meeting on Tuesday, the 25th. We will be at Squadron Line School, so we're going on the road. And I would take a motion to adjourn.
A motion that we stay a little long enough.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor? All right. Thank you all very much. See you on the 25th.